A good shepherd will leave an entire flock just to find that one sheep who wanders off. He lovingly drapes her over his shoulders and brings her back. He restores her to her rightful place in the flock. No matter where we've been or how far we've wandered, our good shepherd will always bring us back and restore us to our rightful place in his heart and in the flock. For his name's sake, he will put us back on the right path. Sister, your shepherd is with you, and he will guide your path. Psalm 23, verse 3. He restores my soul. He guides me down paths of righteousness for his name's sake. I have loved studying this verse this week. It was packed with truth and beauty that, I gotta be honest, on the surface, I didn't even anticipate. So I can't wait for us to unpack every word tonight of it, because every word in the word matters. Now, when you look at this verse, what's it about? Pretty much, it's about a path, right? That's what it is. It's the path of righteousness. John Piper says that a path of righteousness is a right path followed with the right attitude. The right path followed with the right attitude. Y'all, we can get on the right path, but sometimes we don't follow it with the right attitude. But that's what the righteous path is that the Lord, our shepherd, leads us on. So I thought, since we were talking about a path, might as well look at it from behind a steering wheel, because I know that's what most of you did to be a part of this. You got in a car and you drove, right? And so I figured it is exceptionally appropriate for a blind woman to talk about driving, because I have about 10 minutes of experience with it, okay? And so here's what I know about driving. That when you get in the car, what determines your path is your destination, right? Your destination always determines your path. So when I was in college, my friend Allison said, "Hey, you want to drive a car?" And I said, "Sure." And so I got behind the wheel in Allison's car, and we were in an empty bank parking lot. And I had the time of my life. And so I was so excited when I called my mom to tell her. In fact, I called my mom and I said, "Mom, I've got 2 pieces of amazing news," okay? The first one was, "Mom, I met this guy named Curtis, and he asked me out, and he has an earring." And she was silent. And I thought, well, my mama must be just as excited as I am. And then I told her, and then I went with Allison, and I got to drive her car. Okay, my mom was not silent on that one. And I wish I could remember what she said, because I'm sure it is very similar to something I have said and you have said to your children when they do something dumb. And so the only good thing about it was, though, that my mom didn't care about Earring Boy anymore. But I loved driving. And I know that even though I'm not a driver, I'm a passenger, and I am very aware that anytime I get into a car with one of my friends, well, if she's with me, out of grace, she turns on the air conditioning, but then she pulls out her phone and she types the destination in her GPS. That's what this verse is about. This verse is about the destination. Because you see, we all may travel different paths, but we all have the same destination, and that is God's glory. Your path has purpose, and your path has a destination, and that destination is God's glory. But here's the other thing. Our paths, they do have several things in common. And the first thing they have in common is this, that all of our paths have the same on-ramp. So no matter where you are in life, no matter where you're going, we all have the same on-ramp, and that is grace. Grace is the on-ramp. You see, that's what the beginning of this verse says. Psalm 23:3 says, He restores my soul. So a lot of us, when we, and your version may read that He refreshes my soul. A lot of us really think of that verse only as refreshment. But see, as we talked about last week, if we are following our shepherd, if we are submitting to His authority, then we are living rest. So we don't need to be refreshed. What this verse is talking about is being restored through grace. You see, when a sheep wanders away, that sheep can't find its way back. It doesn't have an internal GPS to find the flock again. And in fact, it can get so confused and so scared that it'll just be paralyzed and not be able to move. It requires the shepherd to come get the sheep and restore it, to turn it around and bring it back to the flock, to cause it to repent. That's what this word is talking about, to literally bring us back. That's what it means to be restored. You see, just like a sheep can't find its way back to the flock, y'all, we can't even find our way to Jesus without grace. That's what Ephesians 2 says, that it is by grace that we are saved, through faith. It's not our faith that saves us and draws us. It's God's grace. Grace is the on-ramp. You see, Ephesians 2 verse 1 says that we were dead. We were dead in our trespasses and our sin. We were dead. Dead people cannot resurrect themselves to find their way back to the flock. They're dead. They need to be brought back to life. And that's what Ephesians 2 verse 4 says, but God. But God, being rich in mercy, He is so rich in mercy because of this great love with which He loved us, even though we were dead in trespasses, He made us alive in Christ. You see, that's grace. Grace is the on-ramp. I have this little ceramic turtle that I keep in my jewelry box with my rings, so that every time I finger through to find a ring to wear, I feel this little turtle. My son Clayton gave it to me when he was in the 4th grade. He went on a field trip, and that's what he brought me. And I've kept it not just because it's sentimental, because it's from my son, but because of what it represents. You see, every time I feel that turtle, I remember that that's who I am. I'm a turtle on a fence post. A turtle on a fence post. He didn't get there by himself. Someone had to place that turtle on that fence post. Grace is the on-ramp. We were dead and He made us alive. That's what our shepherd did for us. He restores us. But here's what's really cool about this word restored. It's written in what they call the imperfect tense, which means it's not a one-time action. It means it happens over and over and over. Every time you wander, He brings you back. That's who your shepherd is. Every time you wander, He rescues you. I have a friend named Anna, and Anna is younger than me, a single young woman, and we had been friends for years. And we would text all the time and call, and then I didn't hear from her very often. And I wondered why. I figured she had a boyfriend. And sure enough, she texted me and told me about her boyfriend, and then she texted me less and less. And when I would call her, she wouldn't return my calls. She became more isolated. And I didn't know what was going on until one Saturday, she called me in tears. And she said, "Can I come over?" And I said, "Sure." And she came over with a suitcase and stayed for months because she told me what had happened. This man that she loved, he loved the idea of her as long as he could construct her into who he wanted her to be. And so it started very slowly. He would begin to isolate her from her friends and her family. He would tell her how beautiful she was, but then he would slowly begin to tell her how she could improve her looks, how she wasn't as attractive as someone else, how she could improve her behavior. He was supposedly a Christian man, so he was very quick to point out her sin. chapter and verse. So that Bible that used to be a refuge to her suddenly became this weapon that she was afraid of, because it was a reminder that she was never good enough, not good enough for him, not good enough for anyone else. And every time she got this glimpse of the reality of who he was and how he was treating her, she would try to leave, but she just couldn't quite do it. And so Saturday morning when she woke up, he had been exceptionally cruel. And even though she was so beaten down, there was this tiny vapor of strength in her. And she opened her Bible and she cried out to the Lord, God, please rescue me. I cannot rescue myself. And she opened to Isaiah chapter 30, and her eyes fell upon verses 12 through 15, where the Lord is talking about Judah, how the nation of Judah trusted in oppression. But he says, return to me where you will find your rest. And it was as if her eyes were open once again and she realized she had been trusting in oppression. And that was what God used to rescue her and give her the strength. And so the next morning, when she went to church, she walked into the sanctuary a few minutes late. And she didn't realize it, but her boyfriend was already there, and everyone was standing to sing so she could see the back of his head. And then right next to him, she saw a young woman, and she saw their hands work together. She turned around and left that church, and that's when she came to my house. She said, it was the most painful rescue, but I couldn't have rescued myself. You see, that's what God does for us. When we have wandered, when we don't have the strength to return, God returns us to himself. He restores us over and over and over to himself, to our true identity, to who we are in the flock. He will never let one of his sheep go. He will rescue you, and it is through grace. You see, it is grace that puts us on the path. It is grace that keeps us on the path. It is grace that sustains us. It is grace that strengthens us. Grace, grace, grace. He restores our souls. The second thing that our paths have in common, not only is grace the on-ramp, but our paths are for our good. Our paths are for our good. You see, when a shepherd is leading sheep through a wilderness, he will notice there may be some paths that are already worn, like some other sheep have gone there, but that doesn't mean that he will automatically choose that path for his sheep. The shepherd also never drives his sheep. He will always lead his sheep. And he may choose a path that isn't the one those sheep expect, but the path he chooses will always be for their good. You see, you can be on a right path, and it can feel wrong, because it may not be easy, or it may be bumpy, or it may have turned before you were ready for it to. And you wonder, Lord, you've restored my soul. You continue to restore me, and you've put me on this path, but how can it be right when it feels so wrong? Well, being the non-driver that I am, I'm going to share with you some more experience I've had on the highways to help you understand how the Lord has taught me this verse. Your right paths can feel wrong because sometimes you find yourself in what I call the HOV lane. So when Phil and I travel to different cities and we leave the airport, he is always so happy that he's not alone in that vehicle, because that means he can be considered a high occupancy vehicle and he can get in the fast lane, right? But here's the thing with the HOV lane. You're usually in that car with a bunch of your people. And that means you can't just pull over anytime you want. You have to keep up with the stream, right? And you can't always get off of that HOV lane anytime you want. You have to keep going. And your people can get grumpy. How much longer? Are we there yet? She looked at me, he touched me, I gotta go to the bathroom. And your people can get grumpy, and you can grip that steering wheel and think, is this really all there is? That path can feel like it's monotonous and you're going nowhere fast. You're just spinning your wheels, doing the same thing over and over, and you wonder if it's ever going to change, and you can think, this path can't be right. It just feels wrong because there's nothing big that ever happens here. Oh. Girls, if God has put you in a situation where you're on a path and you got a lot of people you're carrying around with you, that is so purposeful. God has you where He wants you to be. And even when the stress begins to surmount, and even when the tension rises, and even when you feel like you spend your days in trivialities of wiping noses and refereeing arguments, your path has purpose. And your path is for your good. So stay on the path. Sometimes, though, our path can feel wrong because we're driving along and then poof, we're stuck in traffic. And all of a sudden, whether it's because of our own choices, or it might be the habits of others or the bad choices of others, suddenly we're stuck. We're not going anywhere. And we think, wait a minute, I have my GPS set. I've got my destination. I got my plans, and I'm stuck right here. And I can sit on my horn all day, and nothing's changing and nothing's moving. And we can feel like the path is suddenly pointless. Oh, sisters, if you feel like you're stuck, don't try to get off that path. You trust your shepherd, and you stay on that right path with a right attitude. And the Lord will begin to move you forward when He knows it's time, because your shepherd is always in the process of leading you in paths of righteousness. That path is for your good, even when it doesn't feel so good. Sometimes, though, we can be on that right path and it feels wrong because we end up on the shoulder. Suddenly, life happens. And all of a sudden, we're speeding along. Everything's good. We're going. We got our plans. We got our purpose. We got our map. We got our GPS. And then something sidelines us. And we end up on the side of the road. And we're watching everybody joyride past us. And you know what happens when you're stuck on the side of the road with a flat tire or something? Everybody that speeds by, it's like you feel the pressure of it. And you're so aware that you're going nowhere and everybody else is going somewhere. And you're sidelined. Sometimes that happens because you lose the job that you thought you were made for. Sometimes that happens because you lose the spouse that you believe God created you for. And you're sidelined. And you're on the shoulder. And you think, can this kind of path ever be right when it feels so wrong? Girl, your path has purpose. So be patient if you're on the shoulder. Be patient because your path is for your good. And ultimately, the third thing that our paths have in common, not only that grace is our on-ramp or that the path is for our good, but the destination of our path is God's glory. You see, that's why I can say with full confidence that your path is for your good, because your path is also for God's glory, and whatever brings Him glory will bring you good. It may not look like you expect, but whatever brings Him glory will bring you good. The path, the destination of that path is for God's glory. Do you know that a shepherd, of course, he cares for his sheep, he cares about his sheep, but ultimately, the condition of the sheep is a reflection of the shepherd's character. So that good shepherd is going to take care of his sheep because that's what befits a shepherd of a good reputation. If he doesn't take care of his sheep, then his reputation is shot. So for you and me, God's character is at stake in the way He directs and leads and takes care of our lives. We have a good shepherd, and everywhere He leads you on this path ultimately will be for His glory. So I think there's a verse that all of us probably need to type into our life GPS. It's Romans 11, verse 36. Romans 11, verse 36 says, from him, through him, for him are all things. To him be glory forever. You see, that means even when your path doesn't feel right, it's from him. And you know how you're going to make it? Through him. And do you know what the purpose is? For him are all things. To him be glory forever. So when you're struggling because you're in that HOV lane wondering if it's ever going to slow down, you can remember this is from him. I'm going to get through this because it is through him and it will be for my good. And ultimately this is for him. All things to his glory. When you're looking at your life and you are stuck in traffic and everybody else is passing you by, you can pause and say, no, this path that I am on, it is from him, it is through him, and it is for him. To him all things be glory. When you're stuck on the side of the road wondering why life has passed you by, you can look at that and say, no, from him, through him, and for him. In all things to him be the glory. Our youngest son, Connor, when he was in 9th grade, you know, that was the beginning of high school in our school district. And so he had his schedule. And when he arrived on the first day, something went wrong with his schedule. And he ended up in the varsity debate class. Well, he had signed up for the novice debate class. And so there he was with all these experienced debaters. And he came home from school so upset. I can't believe I'm in this class. I don't know anything. Everybody's talking. I don't even know the vocabulary they're using. And so his dad and I said, well, you can go talk to your counselor, get it changed. And that was the plan. The next day he went to do so. But for whatever reason, he was not able to change that class. So we said, just, you know, you'll make it. You'll do okay. You'll make it. So he was in the class 2 weeks. He went to his first debate tournament. When he got home, he said, I haven't cried since first grade. But after my first debate, I went in the bathroom and cried. It was so bad. 4 years later, he took first place in nationals for international extemporaneous speaking. You couldn't get a higher honor. And he thought he was in the wrong place. You see, where you are right now may feel wrong, but that doesn't mean it's not right. God puts you on the path where he wants you to be. He will sustain you through his grace. It will be for your good, and ultimately it will bring him glory. There's a shrub in the desert Southwest called the manzanita. And the manzanita, of course, I've never seen it, but I know that I have heard it has this beautiful bark that's like a really highly polished resin. And it never flowers, though. I shouldn't say never. It rarely flowers, though. It has these really hard shells, and they're these seed pods, and they never open and blossom. The only time that a manzanita actually will flower is when there's a fire. Because the heat of the fire breaks open that hard shell. And then the manzanita is beautiful. You may be on a hard path, but it may be that very path that God is using to bring out your beauty. Sometimes it's only the fire that can make you flower. Your restoration, your righteousness, it makes your shepherd look remarkable. Your restoration, your righteousness, it is for your shepherd's renowned. And all the sisters said,
Say Jesus.